Welcome to this week's first live edition of the Casual Shooters Podcast, your premier podcast for the casual shooter. I say first because tomorrow night we're going to have another live event going on with the Area 6 runoff. Tonight, though, I am talking with Luigi Lee and Yee-min Lin about their run for USPSA president. We had a debate a few months back with all of the candidates. Now we're down to two. This will not be your classic debate. It's going to be more of a discussion around topics with some questions. Hopefully, this will give you everything you need to know, your last minute questions being answered before the polling opens in about 8 days. So, with that, join me in welcoming both Luigi and Yee-min to the show. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Dave.
Howdy, howdy.
What's going on?
You almost ready, Yee-min?
Yeah, I definitely do not have the most professional setup here, but I think we should be okay. So I appreciate y'all's patience today, and thanks for everybody watching the show.
All righty. All right. So as you guys are aware, but the audience is not, at the moment, we are not doing an intro, but you will have the opportunity at the end for a closing statement for yourself. Instead, we're going to get right down to business. And audience, there's quite a few of you on right now. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to post them. All right, so gentlemen, you guys got the list of topics that we were going to discuss. Sorry I didn't get them to you yesterday evening. That's what I wanted to, but things got busy yesterday. Anyway, the number one question I've been asked, and I've heard Yee-min, is with your situation, people want to be reassured in whatever way that you can that you feel confident that you'll be able to take the office of president if you were to be elected.
No, I appreciate the question, Dave. I know that's a really hot topic of discussion. First off, the board did give me the opportunity to reapply for my RO certification if I were to be elected. I think in addition to that option that was laid out in the May 29th meeting minutes, I was still included on the ballot so that people could vote for me. And for those of you that voted, during the first election go-round, you have my thanks and appreciation. I expect that given the board, did put me on the ballot and that they give me the opportunity to reapply for my RO certification, should the membership vote me back into the office, I would expect that the board would acknowledge and honor the members' wishes. So if there's any questions about whether the board would do that, we could take a look at the precedence that was set when the membership dues were increased a couple of weeks ago. The members did take the opportunity to voice their concerns to the board, and the board listened to those concerns and had a special meeting, and they rightfully mitigated the impact of the membership dues increase the following week. So for those people that are concerned that the board may do something in contravention to the members' wishes, well, they have set the precedence that they do in fact listen to what the membership has to say with regards to the direction of the organization.
Okay. You have any comment, Luigi?
Yeah, I just wanted to see. You said that you can reapply for your RO certification, but I'm pretty sure that the board meeting minutes that were amended was to repetition the directorship for reconsideration in the appeal process that you just did. I would like to know that in a span of 6 months, given that pretty interesting statement that the board stated for you, not for you, the board issued the statement regarding your situation, what would have changed in 6 months for them to make a different decision? It's said that you guys couldn't come to an agreement.
Well, that's definitely a valid question, Luigi. I would look at it from the perspective of, the appeals process was handled. I certainly can't go into the details of the decision-making process, but the appeals process was conducted and it was adjudicated. So at this point, the determination on the appeal was granted. this process to apply for my RO certification back, that would be considered a brand new instance. And the board, and even the director of NRI has made statements in the past regarding, ensuring that members aren't necessarily held for double jeopardy. So I would consider this as a brand new issue that comes up if, I were to be reelected by the members. So this would be a brand new situation.
Okay, because that's not how I read the minutes. It said that you're able to petition the board of directors in 1 year's time for reconsideration on May 31st, 2024. And then it was amended to give you the benefit, if in fact that you did, if you wanted to, that you could petition prior to December 31st for reinstatement on the 31st. So you would have a valid certification day one.
Well, I think as we've all understood from looking at the meeting minutes, we can all read the meeting minutes and have our own particular interpretation of what they say. I can't speak for the board's, I can't speak for the board's mindset or how they intend on approaching it. What I can say is that the opportunity was provided for me to regain my RO certification if elected as president, prior to the time frame that was established by the director of NRI. And all I can do is, basically ensure that I'm in a position to be able to take the position in accordance with the USPSA bylaws.
Perfect.
All right. So, and with that, so we have it clarified. The first motion was to uphold the level 4 discipline imposed by DNROI. Everybody voted yes, except for Frank Rizzi, the Area 7 director. Ted Murphy abstained. That passed. Then there was a motion to amend the time period, which, as you stated, Luigi, initially was for May 31st, 2024. So a period of 1 year RO suspension. But then there was a motion to amend by Scott Arnberg, seconded by Frank Rizzi, to allow Yee-min to petition the board of directors prior to December 31st for possible reinstatement of his range officer certification on December 31st, 2023. Everybody, so Leighton, yes. Bruce Gary was absent. Leighton, yes. Scott, yes. Mel, yes. Rick, yes. Bruce Wells, no. Frank Rizzi, yes. And Ted Murphy abstained again. So it was it wasn't unanimous, but it was one shy. So it was six to one.
Just another clarification on that. We did not have a sitting Area 8 director. So Russell Fortney will have a vote. Correct. And Leighton, as sitting vice president, would not get a vote. He would have to abstain due to conflict of interest reasons.
Okay. Well, there we have it. That's everything we know on the subject.
Great.
All right. Point number 2. If elected, you guys are literally the chairman of the board. Now, do you guys have any relevant business experience that would translate into the USPSA? And this would be Luigi.
I've been in the corporate world for a number of years. I've owned businesses. I've helped start businesses. I've taken over businesses. I've taken over departments. I've been very adamant on different board of directors. And I've worked a lot with committees, especially in my tenure with Miami-Dade County Public School System. I worked with some committees on there and within the school that I was at. So I've been a 1099 employee or independent contractor for quite a number of years. Anybody that's done contract work, that you're your own boss, you're your own business owner. Between that and the restaurant world that I've been involved with for a very long number of years, between owning and managing, I think I'm in a great position to help serve the organization with that type of business experience.
Okay. Yee-min?
So in the past, I served as a program product manager in the Silicon Valley tech industry. I would say my primary experience as relative to USPSA is that USPSA is a 501c3 nonprofit. And so as a nonprofit with a board, having served as the president of my gun club for 2 years and having been on the board of directors for 2 years, and my experience with the 8 months that I was USPSA president, there is an understanding of how the organization works. We were making some very good progress to run the organization, more appropriately from a corporate governance perspective. So that being said, there's definitely a little bit of a distinction between doing things the way that we would like to in a corporate world, and then dealing with a 501c3 nonprofit where you've got board of directors, you've got employees, and you've got membership that you need to answer to. So there was definitely some positive progress being made in terms of having the organization function more effectively from a financial perspective, as well as the method by which we communicate with the membership. And so that from that perspective, I've had that time in the seat, and I'd like to be able to continue on with some of the initiatives that we were working on to continue the work that was being done for the members.
Okay. Now, another topic that has come up recently is limited optics. It's already a provisional division, but it was added to Iron Sights Nationals so people could shoot it there. So it looks like I have a feeling the way it's headed, it's probably going to be a division, but that means it's either going to have to go into carry optics, or they're going to have to split those off into two different divisions. What are your thoughts on limited optics and how that plays out in the future of the USPSA, Yee-min?
No, thanks for the question, Dave. So one of the things to consider if you take a look at the February meeting minutes is that there was a concern expressed from the membership that every provisional division that is created ultimately becomes a permanent division. And the metrics by which we evaluate whether a provisional division should be permanent, that's not necessarily been the most transparent to the membership. So with that in mind, the discussion and what was voted on was that we wanted to at least see a minimum of 5% activity participation across the entire USPSA membership. So not just major matches, but also your club matches. And that number was selected based on single stack numbers. So single stack participation is roughly 5%. Again, we can always at least use that as a starting metric, but you figure if a provisional division could at least meet the requirements for a minimal performing division, then that would be a good place to start that says, hey, the demand is there from the members and there's actually participation. So at this point, what I anticipate is that, yes, limited optics will most likely become a permanent division. That's spelled out into the bylaws. We have until May of 2024 for the initial assessment of the provisional division's performance. Should the board at that point decide, they can either adjust the rules, that's spelled out in the bylaws, and if necessary, we can also continue data collection and evaluation of the division for an additional year. At the time, the thought process was that there is a place for slide-mounted single-action 2011 type guns, and once that would potentially be in place as a permanent division, then you've established the upper limit for what is possible with a slide-mounted optic gun. You can run a magwell, you can run a single action. The only difference is that you can't put a comp, and you don't have a frame-mounted optic. So once you've established that upper limit, then there was the potential. Again, this would be a discussion with the board as well as the membership, that you could potentially realign carry optics so that you would have a situation where you have production with a dot, limited with a dot. And with the initial decision of limited optics being minor only, the concern that's expressed by the members of, well, hey, I don't want to shoot my production gun in limited because I've got the competitive disadvantage in major minor. That competitive disadvantage does not exist. So we're not, the end state was that we weren't going to be taking away from those members that have basically played within the rules and what we laid out for carry optics. They would just have a different place to play in, and they could do so, and still stay in the bounds of competitive equity. So that was kind of the intent of the time when the discussion of limited optics occurred. We'll see how that goes. I mean, there's definitely some good participation, even with it including into iron sight nationals. Limited optics, I think, is either first or second in terms of the number of registrations there. So there is a clear interest, and it was not driven in any shape or form by what the manufacturers wanted. It was a recognition of that there is a platform that does not have an adequate place within the sport, and limited optics was the path determined to basically find a place for that platform.
And just to add a little bit of a statistic in there of something you said, 5% across the board. In just the few months it's been out, it's at 4.06% activity
Did Dave cut out?
in major matches only. No, I hear you, Luigi.
Okay.
So we're almost at that threshold in major matches alone. So I imagine it's probably going to reach the 5% pretty easily. Luigi, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. You cut out there.
Oh, I cut out. I'm sorry. What did you miss?
Oh, the start of that question.
Oh, okay. Well, the start was just limited optics.
Mhm.
It's a provisional division. It was added to Iron Sights Nationals.
Oh no, yeah, I got that. I didn't know what your statement when once
Oh,
the
it
meeting
was
was
just
over.
it was just the statistics I posted that limited optics in just the short time it's been out in major matches only.
It's already hit
it's
the
already
5%.
yeah, it's already
Yeah.
basically at 5%.
My views on limited optics, carry optics, and how they translate over to production optics. As it stands right now, I don't see enough of a difference between limited optics gun and production carry optics guns. I mean, realistically, you've got production guns that weigh 59 ounces. You slap a dot on there with single actions that get down to a pound and a quarter. I mean, you can see some of these CZ pattern guns that, like an A01. You've got fantastic triggers that are on par, if not better, than most 2011 triggers. And I don't see that much of a difference between one and the other, especially when you have parts and pieces that you can swap out on a carry optics gun that isn't a thumb rest, but sure looks like a thumb rest.
Right.
So I don't see that much of a difference between them. We already have the rule set for carry optics. I mean, it's pretty much a race gun. And I know because I've gone through every single iteration of a carry optics gun. I started shooting this in 2017. I'm a very early adopter. I was there when it was 10 round mags. I don't see that difference. I would have much rather have gone the IDPA route, which was if it fits in the box with a cutout for an optic, you're good to go. Instead of just adding another division because a certain platform doesn't fit that division. I mean, the triggers are almost identical. The weights is a non-issue because very few competitors are actually hitting that 59 ounce limit. And if you look at the nationals, the setup for nationals right now, it's third. Limited is first because it's a qualifying match. Production is second because it's a qualifying match. Limited optics is third because who wants to shoot single stack or revolver? And my only other question was, why did we use single stack for that 5%? Why did we go to revolver, which is, arguably a lot more minuscule of a division, and it's still valid?
Can you repeat that because you kind of broke up a little bit?
We use
About
single
the single stack.
Yee-min said that we use single stack as the minimum requirement, which is 5%. That's what single stack is based off of or performing at. Why wouldn't we have just used revolver instead? Arguably revolver is a lot less of a division. A lot less activity. Yes, it's unique, and yes, we should keep it. But if we're keeping revolver at X% of activity, why don't we use that as a basis for something new?
Okay. And just from the, again, a couple of statistics real quick. Single stack major matches only 2.59% participation. Revolver major matches only 1.07%. So, okay. Now, those numbers being thrown out, limited 10 being 0.65%, limited optics is almost up to the same percentage wise as production. Do you think it's time to sit down, the board sit down as a whole, and realign the divisions? Luigi.
Yeah, I think it's a conversation that definitely needs to happen, and I would love to be a part of that. But if you were to consider some of the other divisions, some of the other sports, I mean, SAS, the Cowboy Action Society, they had almost 700 competitors at their nationals last year, and they between divisions and categories, because they do it a little differently. They've got almost double the amount that we do, and their divisions are people are going to want to shoot um, what they want to do. If I want to shoot a wheel gun, I mean, I'm gonna shoot a wheel gun. But look at what Iron Sight Nationals is right now. There's 7 registered competitors for Iron Sight Nationals in limited 10, and we need at least 10 in the division at our nationals to recognize it. I swapped from production to L10 just to try to pat that number up for the membership. You know, the guys that are diehard L10 shooters that want to do that. Um, but if I'm in the position where I can have that discussion, I can have that conversation. I already travel around the country on my own dime. You know, having that conversation with members and having that member input is just gonna be what happens.
Okay. Yee-min?
I think if we're talking about the long-term direction of the sport, that is a discussion that needs to happen, just like Luigi mentioned. Um, One thing to, a part of it is basically also looking at, all the different aspects of what a significant paradigm shift would look like. So that discussion was something that came up at the General Assembly at the World Shoot from some of the younger regional directors out there, in terms of, hey, are the divisions correct? Are they where the market is going? What are our members actually competing at? I think what's fundamental to consider is, one, are the divisions appropriate to ensure that folks who want to be able to participate in practical shooting as well can basically do so with whatever gun they come with, right? We do want to be able to be open as much as possible to potential members that find out about practical shooting in USPSA. And the other aspect is, it's a conversation that needs to happen in conjunction with, IPSC. So we still are in IPSC region. So any adjustments we do on our end, that the consideration would also have to be put in place for how it impacts, our participation in the international community. So I know, Luigi, we've had this discussion before of, if we were to try to combine production L10 and Revo into a classic division, how would you break that out? At the end of the day, it's a discussion that should happen. It's a discussion that should involve the membership, and it's also because of the way the nonprofits work. There's very little that we do in the sport that requires an immediate, rapid change. It's something that should be very deliberative in terms of the information that we gather to determine whether division realignment needs to happen, but just to start the conversation so that we can be honest about, hey, to the divisions right now, why do they exist? Why were they originally created? Does that paradigm exist now where that division still needs to be in place? Can they be combined? So on and so forth. And it's a number of factors that I think we should start the discussion on, so that we can, get to a point where we go, okay, this is what we're going to do, and this is why we're going to do it.
Okay. Now, to piggyback onto this, so Luigi, we're going to go back to you with it. We'll call this another subset, but there is a comment that states that right now the current makeup of the board is resistant to change. How would you work to counteract that and try to get the board to progress? I know, Yee-min, you mentioned you got to start that conversation. So how do you guys start that conversation and get that ball rolling?
So before we go to that question, I just wanted to have a clarification on
Okay.
We are the U.S. regional affiliate of IPSC. That is absolutely true. And as long as we hold the charter and we have that agreement with IPSC, we have to do what we need to do, sending a team and making that we have to have a national champion. And there's a lot of things that we're required of in the IPSC charter. That being said,
bye. There, and he's back.
Sorry. That being said, we do have certain alignments with IPSC, but our rule book has been changing with additions and addendums, even when the original rule book said IPSC with USPSA secondary rules on every line. It's been changing for 30 years. We also have IPSC nationals in the US. That would be a very easy way of deciding who our teams are in the IPSC, the divisions. So what USPSA does and what USPSA wants to do, if we want to change our divisions, if we want to consolidate our divisions, that is a conversation that USPSA members need to have input on. We don't really need to think about the rest of the world for our USPSA rule set. Now, when we hold IPSC matches, which we don't usually hold many in the US, I try to go to all of them as I can, just because I do travel internationally on my own. Then we would be using the IPSC rule set with the IPSC divisions. Now, certain other regions have started something called standard minor or standard optics, which is the limited optics, our version of limited optics, and their rule set is completely different than what we're putting out. So if we were talking about alignment with IPSC, maybe we should have had alignment completely with IPSC. But we have that with IPSC matches. Now, for what the other question, having the board resistant to change, that is the responsibility of the president. He's the chairman of the board. Okay, he is supposed to be the leader. Having X amount of years in life experience in different managerial roles, owner roles, boss roles, being able to communicate effectively, being able to listen. Those are things that a leader needs to have. I believe that I have those qualities that I can bring to the organization as a whole. I mean, anybody that's ever met me at a match, it's always, hi, how are you? What's going on? How have you been? What are issues? How can I help? What do you need? Even if I'm on deck, I've gone to the safe table to fix a gun, to go back to the line and start shooting. And I've already done things I need to do, proving myself anymore than that. Now I'm here for the membership. Now I'm here for you guys.
So Yee-min, how do you start that conversation?
I think the first place to start with any sort of discussion like that would be, honestly, to start off at the committee level, right? So I know we're talking about this topic later on, but something along the lines of a competition committee, right? You can have a competition committee where you have a board member that basically handles the direction of the conversation, but then you're getting your input from key stakeholders across all the 8 areas. So, for example, you could, again, we're just spitballing here. You could basically get a couple of skilled match directors, a couple of guys that are grandmasters in the sport, that are competitive, that are actively competitive. You can find some of the guys in the middle to basically have that discussion of, hey, if we were to do something like that, what would that look like? What would be the information that would be required in order to make that kind of paradigm shift with the way that the sport is being run? So experience-wise, coming in as having been USPSA president, that is something that has been a challenge, is providing adequate and appropriate information so that the board can function from a leadership perspective. So I think that the first place to start would be to task that out to a committee, competition committee, that says, hey, if we were to reimagine the divisions, say we're starting fresh, what would that look like? And here are some of the considerations. I think the work that you've done, and Jay Slater has identified that optics platforms are the dominant platform within the sport. What is it? Something like 75% of competitors are basically shooting some kind of optics platform. So with that in mind, where do we go from there? Okay, now that you've established that baseline for starting the discussion, then you let the committee do its work. At some point, that way, when the board actually has to make that decision, they can make that decision with a report that's been properly researched, with the data that's presented, to go ahead and determine, hey, is this the direction that we want to take the sport?
Yeah, and it's like 74, 75% is just carry optics open and PCC. So 3/4 of it is 3 divisions.
Everybody likes shooting a dot. It's easier.
I like shooting a dot, especially at my age. Take that. All right. Now, Luigi, I'm going to use something you said as a transition to our next topic, which was you travel around on your own dime. So let's talk finances. Everybody's favorite USPSA topic, especially on the internet. So, give me, this should be Yee-min starting this one. I'm going to add in the 990s because we haven't seen one for last year yet. I'm not saying it's not there. I'm just saying we haven't seen it. So, your thoughts on, how do I want to say it? Trying to correct the hemorrhage of money each year and trying to get the organization back into the black. Again, knowing that you're one of 9, you're not the finance chair, you're not the finance committee person, any of that, but you're still going to have some input. So, what are your thoughts?
So part of the challenge that both Donna and I ran into when we first took position was just understanding what our baseline was, right? So that was something that Donna spent a significant amount of time trying to determine what our baseline spending was to begin with. So during the process of trying to figure out our 2022 P&Ls and expenditures, there was a fair amount of time, actually a very significant amount of time, just ensuring that the accounting of our expenses and everything was categorized correctly. So that was something Donna did a really great job of in terms of being able to provide some more financial granularity or visibility into what it was that the organization was spending, and specifically where was it being categorized. So as far as the budget process for 2023, there was a consideration given to, hey, there's got to be some cost cutting measures put into place. So there was a reduction, at least in terms of the spending areas that we felt were the lowest hanging fruit. And so where we're at now with finances, part of the challenge is essentially, okay, once you've established the budget, what are the financial tracking measures that are put in place to ensure that we're staying on track. Again, we did basically go through a significant paradigm shift from having a president CEO under Mike Foley to a split of the responsibilities with a president and a managing director. So, it's definitely trying to learn on the fly. And so from a finance perspective, it's putting in those measures in place so that, again, I think something that's been brought up is, hey, on a monthly basis, we should be able to see a P&L statement that gives the board that opportunity to say, hey, are we still staying on track with our budget? And it's a work in progress. What's taken place, since my departure from the organization, I can't necessarily speak to that. But it's right now the process and the challenge is laying in the appropriate corporate foundation, corporate governance, corporate structure to ensure that when a budget is established, we're able to track on a monthly basis, as we should, because the board does have a fiduciary responsibility to the organization, and determine, hey, are we still on track, or are there some adjustments that need to be made?
Okay, Luigi.
Yeah, absolutely. Yee-min made some great points there. But just to clarify, the 990 has been filled out, and the audit has come back. So the audit committee did make a statement a few months ago saying that it came back with a green light. So all that information is already there. The board has access to it. It's why it's not public. That's up to the board. I'm not involved there. But I just had some questions for Yee-min before I went in mine. Yee-min, you were president in 2023 after you saw the 2022 finances. You guys were working on it. You saw all this stuff. What did you see? What did Donna do that specifically? I mean, what were the moves that were made and that were going in the right direction? I mean, because everybody says, "Oh, yes, we were looking at categorizing new fees. We were looking at categorizing our accounting. That's all bookkeeping. That's been like that for years." What actually was the moves that we did that were putting us in the right direction?
Is it okay if I answer that, Dave?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Yee-min.
Okay, so one of the things that we initially started off with is reassessing our corporate footprint. So we basically releasing a facility that was outsized for what was required for the organization. That was a lease that Donna was working on to basically get us out of that, or to basically sublet that. So for those members that noticed, we did change our physical address from
Cedra Woolley.
Burlington to Cedra Woolley. So that was a resizing of what our corporate footprint was, so that it was more appropriate to what was required for the organization. There were some other contracts that we were tied under in terms of office rentals. So there was a process done by Donna to basically end those, terminate those early. Let's see what else. There was an actual analysis of the per member cost for members. So for every member that is in USPSA, there's always an annual cost for the maintenance. So trying to reduce those recurring costs, that was something that Donna was addressing. And let's see, even little things like if you take a look at the election this year. So elections, I don't remember exactly off the top of my head what the number is. I know, but postage and mailing costs, that was always a significant factor into the cost of the elections. So the decision was made for this election cycle, rather than sending out postcard reminders, the decision was made to basically use an email instead. And so when you're talking about sending postcards to 37,000 members, or whatever the numbers are for who is eligible to vote, that number adds up after a while. So there were steps in place to basically reduce our corporate operational footprint. That was at least a step in the right direction. Now, are there other places where we could potentially examine? Sure, there's other places we can examine. That also being said, we're COVID started in 2019. We're 4 years into the COVID economy, and I think anybody can basically see that costs have basically risen everywhere. So even for fundamental staple goods, costs have increased as a general rule of thumb. And so it's really a two-step process to see where we can be more efficient in our expenditures, and also evaluating our revenue sources. So that's kind of what we were looking at the beginning of the year. Now, what happened after that in terms of cost controls and ensuring that our expenses were aligned with the budget, unfortunately, that was a process that really occurred after my departure.
Sounds good. That's a lot of answers there. But we have a comment in the comments here that says analysis isn't cost savings, from who I believe is who was a candidate for the Area 6 directorship. So thank you, former candidate. But how many months were you president in 2023?
4 months.
4 months, okay. And you said that you were working on a monthly profit and loss statement with Donna.
Donna was, if we want to take a look at the bylaws, the managing director in the bylaws is primarily responsible for the finances of the organization. So is that a collaborative process between Donna and the board members? Yes.
When in your tenure in those 4 months of 2023, was there a monthly profit and loss statement offered to the membership?
Well, that's a couple months ago, and without looking at the meeting minutes, I think there was a couple of profit loss statements that were offered, but not necessarily on a monthly basis, which was a concern that was expressed by various board members on the timing and accuracy and just presenting the profit loss statements in general.
Hold on, Yee-min, when you say there were concerns by the board members, are you saying they were concerned that they were being released or that we weren't releasing them?
Just ensuring that profit and loss statements were being provided so that the board members could see what we were doing. So
Okay. I'm just asking because I was unclear myself.
no, I understand. I appreciate the question for clarification.
Thanks for the clarification.
We good with the finances on that part? Everybody said their piece?
I believe so.
Okay. All right. So the next one, which you guys have much more direct impact on, would be nationals. What are your thoughts on, because apparently we that's one of the places where we lose money. And I've had many discussions lately with different people about that and whether it's even possible to not hemorrhage money at a nationals. So with that, this would be for Luigi. I had to look at my sheet. Sorry.
I've got it in front of me too. So
okay.
This will be a collaborative effort, right? What did you say? It was a guided discussion more than a debate.
Exactly.
So, I mean, like Yee-min said, all right, we've had issues with our bookkeeping. We didn't know where our finances were going. From our budget, our audit report, our Form 990s, all of that stuff is super bird's eye. There's no specifics. You know, we can say, nationals expenditures. Well, we're holding more than one national event. Is any of that cost going to any of the outsourced nationals? Is it just USPSA nationals? Is it multi-gun? Is it two-gun? Is it IPSC? Is it Steel Challenge? You know, World Speed Steel still falls under the USPSA umbrella. So what we would have to do is look at what the finances historically have been. And the match director for the past few years has been Jake Martins and Shannon Smith. You know, if we're strictly talking USPSA handgun. Mm-hmm. And I've gone through a few iterations of what has happened, you know, between consolidated matches, between standalones, and all that. But like, if you just look at what Carry Optics did this year, you know, it was roughly 500 shooters. Is it a large match? Yeah, it's a pretty big match. But if you go back to 2018 for 9 days of nationals, I mean, we had 852 unique entries in 9 days of nationals done in 1 week. If you look at all the entries, it was over 1,100. And that's a pretty big match. Granted, a bigger match is going to cost more, but would we save enough money on some of the other expenses? Now, the nationals dates haven't been publicized for 2024 yet, but from what all of the events that recently have transpired, and
he keeps leaving me hanging.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now. What did you say? With everything that has transpired, you cut out.
So with everything that's transpired in the past few years, like, we don't have consistent leadership. Nationals for 2024 has been given 100% under the purview of headquarters of office. Headquarters is in charge of all of nationals for next year. That's all done. So the incoming president has realistically no say in it because the board has voted to give it to Jake Martins and Donna Webb. So we need to be looking at nationals for 2025. And nationals 2025, we have enough time between now and then for an incoming president to make a spectacle, make something great. But we need to go back through the histories, talk to the match directors that have been there, talk and see what the expenses have been. Yes, inflation has happened. Yes, the COVID years have happened. Everything is much more expensive. I mean, an area match that I used to spend $1,500 to get to a few years ago is now costing me $2,000 to $3,000, and everybody's experiencing that. So we need to look at historical numbers. We need to see what worked. We need to see what didn't work. I mean, at any given match, that your biggest expense is going to be staff. Our staff package hasn't changed in a very long number of years. $375 for travel and the same per diem that it was almost 10 years ago. There's certain things that we need to cut costs on. There's certain things that we shouldn't cut costs on. And that's the same in any business. We need to look forward to 2025 and figure out a long-term plan and consistency.
Okay, Yee-min, before you start, now Luigi. So let me ask you this then. Do you think then that losing money in nationals would be okay if you made up for it somewhere else in the organization so that it's a wash?
100% nationals should be a loss leader. Every business venture that is worth something is going to have some sort of loss leader. Costco, they've got a $5 rotisserie chicken in the back.
But now I'm hungry.
Yeah, I know, right? But you're going to walk from that front door where they check your little credit card, and you walk all the way to the back to get that rotisserie chicken. You're going to put $100 in your. It just that happens. We have activity fees for a reason. We have membership dues for a reason. If you look at any of the other shooting organizations, IDPA, they lose money on nationals every year. SAS loses money on nationals. Metal Mania, all of these other organizations, that it is the culmination of the shooting season. It is supposed to be the biggest, the baddest, the best thing on the planet or in the country. But I've shot level 4 IPSC matches abroad. Why shouldn't our nationals be on par with something like that? We had the Pan American in Florida just at the end of last year. We have level 3 matches in the U.S. right now that have more shooters in it than all of our national events.
Wait, what event?
We have level 3 matches in the U.S. right now that have more competitors than all of our nationals. If somebody can do that without activity fees, without membership fees, then there's no reason that our national event can't be that much better.
Now, I do want to say that there were 700 people that tried to get into carry optics nationals alone. So there is desire for shooting. Are you good for us to move on to Yee-min? Are you done, Luigi? Or
I'm good. Yee-min can go.
All right, your turn, Yee-min.
Oh, thanks, Dave. So, just to address one thing that Luigi brought up, part of the reason why you have companies that have loss leaders is they're usually trying to make up that revenue somewhere else. Right now, if you take a look at our revenue numbers at USPSA, our revenue numbers primarily come from really 2 places. One is membership dues, and the second is activity fees. So as far as nationals is concerned, that was something that we were in the process of going through to actually have every national split out so that we could adequately measure and identify what the cost for a specific nationals is. One of the points that Luigi brought up yes, staff is a significant cost. Costs have gone up. Can we look at the edges to basically determine, hey, is this an expense that's really appropriate? Yeah, sure, we could definitely do that. Another thing, for unfortunately also consider is basically where the revenue is coming from. So, it's sort of like the finances. It's really addressing a combination of, okay, are the revenues, or the match fees or any other revenue sources that we have for nationals, is that, still valid given where we're at? And, what can we really do with the expenses? And, I don't necessarily say that our nationals should not necessarily be a loss leader, but to a certain extent, they need to be somewhat self-sustaining, and that is a paradigm that we sort of operated by for time immemorial. Where, okay, we're constantly losing money at nationals. Okay, well, if we're losing 20,000-30,000 at nationals, okay, maybe that's a cost that is absorbable by the organization. If you're looking at a cost that's significantly more than that, then the question becomes, okay, are we right sized for an event that we basically put on for not only for the membership, but also as part of our selection process of the World Shoot team. So that was a process that was being started. Again, the nationals that were held out, all the nationals were held after my departure. So as far as us continuing along that process and tracking the financials and ensuring that the expenses basically stayed within budget, that's I can't speak to that at the moment.
Now, Yee-min, you were in between nationals, correct? Like the last 4 months of last year and in the first 4 months of this year.
Correct.
Okay. Now, here's a comment I'm going to throw up. So this is for you guys to comment on, but it says, this is from Matt Hopkins. I got the cost of each specific nationals when I was on the board. Now, again, Yee-min, I'm also stating that you were there in between nationals, but he's asking if anything has changed. Are either of you aware of these specific items that he mentions?
That time that Matt Hopkins was on the board, I wasn't present, I wasn't involved in that process. So
Right.
without him basically saying, hey, this is exactly what I got, anything beyond that is conjecture and speculation. I can only speak to what we were working on when I was president, as well as the process that we were going through on the financial side. So if Matt Hopkins says he got individual nationals numbers, I have nothing to basically confirm or deny that.
Okay. Luigi, you aware of anything, or?
I haven't sat on the board, so unfortunately, I don't have access to that. And that was another of the things that I've been very adamant. When people call me, people email me, people ask me, is what I'm planning to do is, until I get there, open the books for myself and see what our current situation is, because we don't have access to it as a member right now. We're in August. We can't make any actual decisions. We can't make any evidence-based decisions at this moment.
Okay.
And nationals, unfortunately, is one of those.
Yee-min, quick question for you, and
Sure.
maybe Luigi knows. I don't know. Does IPSC lose money on the World Shoot? Does anybody know that? Because I don't know, but it popped up when you guys were talking.
Finances for IPSC World Shoots are slightly different. I think that's that's really it's the easiest analogy that comes to mind, and it's not necessarily the correct analogy, because a World Shoot basically occurs every 3 years, right? So not only is the host country able to utilize national level resources that we aren't necessarily able to, there's a fair amount more monetization that occurs at a World Shoot. If we're taking a look at our respective level 3 matches, one thing that to keep in mind is that we have, as of now, the most members in the IPSC community, right? So Russia is still not part of IPSC. So we're roughly 36,000 members, which, if I remember off the top of my head, is about 3 or 4 times more than the next largest regions. So those regions are able to basically run a single nationals, and they're able to put all their time and effort into that. If we were to talk about any consideration of having a single nationals, again, it's something to consider, uh, but it's also something that we're basically trying to service a much larger membership base than other IPSC regions are. So, world shoots are very different beasts. Even a level 4 match, those are continental matches, and those are also very different beasts because they're also once every 3 years and on a rotating basis between IPSC continents. A level 3 match, if we want to compare apples to apples, there are level 3 matches and their IPSC level 3 matches. The finances are about the same. In terms of, hey, what can they do? What people have to expend. How their cost and even the size of the membership that they're including. So
Okay, Luigi, I want to go back to something you said real quick. You said IDPA and SAS lose money, but they just run one nationals a year, do they not? Whereas we run multiples.
I believe SAS runs a nationals and a worlds every year because they have end of trail, which is considered their world championship, and then they have a national championship that usually different. But if anybody has any experience with SAS, I mean, their match might be 600 people, right? But they have multiple warm-up matches, they have side matches, they have other events, and it's like a week long. It's a shindig, and it ends up being like 12, 1,300 entries, something like that. It's ridiculous. The only thing that I could probably liken it to would be 9 days of nationals when we had 800 or so individual entries, 1,100 or so, actual entries.
Okay. All right.
Yes, I did say shindig. But there's a few things I wanted to touch base and get clarification on of what Yee-min said. Yes, since May, you haven't been the president or the regional director, but you still should. I mean, if you care about traveling internationally, uh,
I guess we're. Is that an open-ended question, Dave? I'll just guess.
I think
Can-
he's driving again.
no, I'm not driving again. I think we've got some storms, so my internet might be cutting in and out. But Russia was voted back in June, so they are back.
Oh.
They are an IPSC federation again, so they're back in. So I don't believe we are the largest IPSC region any longer. Another thing is our levels, our tiers of matches. Like our level 3 matches are in USPSA or our area matches. Our IPSC nationals is a level 3 match. Level 4 are the regionals, which is going to be North America, South America, or Latin America, or Pan American. The continental matches, the big ones. European Handgun Championship, the African Handgun Championship, Australasia. Those are going to be the ones that encompass large regions. So when you look at their finances compared to our finances, apples to apples, it's not. It's you're comparing a clementine orange to a full thing of bananas. You just take off.
Keep bringing up food.
Hey, I love food. I really do. So that's you have to take everything with a grain of salt. Hey, if Australasia is going to make X amount of dollars, that is something that would be like, hey, we're going to put on a match that we're going to invite all of Canada, we're going to invite all of the US, all of Mexico, all of Central America, and bring them all over and have a match that's going to be over 1,000 people. Now, historically, we have been able to do that in the US. We had the World Shoot in Frostproof in 2014, and that had, between the World Shoot and IPSC Nationals the following weekend, we had 1,500 competitors. And according to what I've heard, the range owner and the match director lost money on that match, on a World Shoot. Now, Yee-min did make a mention that they have national level support. They have stuff that they can pull on the national level. Like what? I mean, we have had 2 world shoots in the U.S. We had one in 2014 in Frostproof, and we had one in 1986, which was the one before that. Why wouldn't we be able to pull on national level? And that's just a question for Yee-min.
You're gonna say you have to pull on. Why can't we?
Did you get that question, Dave? Because I did not hear any of it.
No, you said why can't we pull on what, Luigi?
Why can't we pull on the national utilities or the events that Yee-min said? I mean, with Thailand, he said you were able to put on national resources, and why wouldn't we be able to do the same for our matches? Because we had a regional here last year as well. We had the Pan American here last year. Why wouldn't we be able to do the same?
By national, do you mean state government money? Is that correct, Yee-min?
I'm not entirely sure what Luigi's referring to. Just again, I think you and I are both basically hearing like every other couple words. So
you said when you put on a regional match, that's every 3 years, that they're in a different situation because they can pool all of their matches into all of their shooters into one match, and they have governmental support or national resources that they can pull upon. What national resources can they pull on that we wouldn't be able to do the same?
Okay, if you really want to go down that rabbit hole, we'll be happy to. So let's take a look at the Thailand World Shoot. All right, you were there at the Thailand World Shoot. So at the World Shoot, we had assistant pasters, right? So that's something that basically allows us to be able to shoot and not have to paste and reset. Those pasters were Thai Royal Navy sailors. Okay, so that was something that the Thai government was able to basically contribute. Am I saying that it's not something that we would be able to do to say, hey, can we get some guys from the National Guard to come out? No, but there is a level of support from governments that, it just quite frankly is not as realistic here in the United States. Most of the countries that have IPSC matches, there's usually some kind of Ministry of Sport. That's part of the reason why IPSC has really been pushing to try to get International Olympic Committee recognition, not necessarily to be in the Olympics, but to have it as a sport. So because once it's recognized as an Olympic sport, that opens up some funding sources for their various ministry of sports that exist. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure we don't have a Ministry of Sport here in the United States. So again, if we want to start getting into government philosophical differences, for the most part here in the United States, and especially for nonprofit stuff, it tends to be more driven upon, what can we get from a volunteer basis rather than in other countries where it's okay, if you apply something here, then we'll basically provide you money and resources to support that. So I mean, you did bring up something about the difference between trying to compare apple to apples. All right, well, let's talk some math numbers. All right, so the European Canadian Championship this year is a continental match. The match fee for an attendee is 550 euros. If you go off the exchange rate, that's roughly $600 for a continental match. Match fee for Carry Optics Nationals this year went up from $295 to $335 for level 3. Okay, you're already talking about a $165 difference. So, if we're going to be talking about apples to apples, again, the match fee difference at a world shoot or even at a level 4 match, that is actually set with the understanding of, what is necessary to run that match effectively. We basically had nationals match fees at $295, at least, for the last 5 or 6 years. That's never been adjusted. If your match fee is supposed to be your primary revenue stream, supplemented by activity fees. Thanks. There's a reason why I'm not a math Asian. I appreciate the math assistance there, internet audience. But again, if we're talking about, the comparing apples to apples, another consideration is, okay, if our primary revenue stream for a nationals is the match fees, then is the match fee appropriately, priced for the demand?
Can I interject just a few things? The entry fee for Thailand, which was a world shoot, was $500 US. The entry fee for European Handgun Championship is 450 euros, not 650. Yes, these are.
Well, that's really interesting because I have the actual pre-match slot allocation letter, and it says 550 euros.
I have a sponsor email that says this is what it is worth.
Well, that's a sponsor email, so I mean, I have no idea how IPSC priced it out for sponsors, but for your general attendees, it was 550 euros, which was not only the pre-match, but it was also the main match. And as I was the regional director and received that email, actually received that email directly from the IPSC secretary, that's the numbers I have. If you got different numbers, as a sponsor. Again,
there is somebody who is going to shoot the match in our chat right now that says that he paid 450 euros for European Handgun Championship.
Fair enough.
Matt was at a sponsored slot.
No, he's shooting the main match, and there are other competitors that I've talked to that 450 euros is the number that was thrown around.
So again, the point of this being, though, is that the match fee for a European Handgun Championship at a level 4 continental match is still significantly higher than what we charge for nationals.
Okay, so is that an issue with what we're charging for nationals, or is that an issue with having all the other supplementals that a regional has or that a continental has? Because I've shot two different continental matches. My first one was in 2015, so I kind of see what the differences are between what we hold internationally, what we hold in the U.S., and what our nationals are. But we kind of got off topic. One of the things that you were talking about for what the national support that they have was, you mentioned that they had the Thai Navy come in for staff reset, right? And that was just something that they were able to get from the region themselves. Again,
as far as I understand, the range that was held at was a range that was constructed by the national government, and they were given national support in order to ensure that match occurred.
Okay. Well, I mean, the range getting built is one thing. We have ranges in the U.S. What you said specifically was they had personnel there that were assisting and pasting, so the competitors didn't have to. Now, that is a cultural thing that we do not have in the U.S. Other than, you have South Carolina, you have North Carolina, you have Bluegrass doing things like that. That they're doing full staff reset matches. That is not an expense that we have for our national match. So that's not something that we can liken to what we have in the U.S. as a national resource. Other than that, I mean, the only other thing that you said that the Thailand match got, which was your experience as RD, was they got the range built by the Navy. They got support from the government to build help. We have range. We were hold a continental or national match. Is there anything else that you recall from your regional director days of what they got in national support from the government, from their local companies, from things like that?
If you're asking me to recall basically every little detail about the differences between how we run our matches in the United States and how the rest of the world runs their matches, with all the international matches that you've attended, I think that would be a much more appropriate question for you to basically say, hey, have you actually seen the budgets and the support that's been provided? Realistically, at the end of the day, there is a difference in what resources we're able to draw on at a national level compared to what other IPSC regions are able to draw on for their level 3 and level 4 matches. Or at least their level 4 and level 5 matches. If we're talking about our level 3 matches, comparing to apples, most IPSC regions are dealing with the same constraints that we are in terms of ensuring that the match is held, and also trying to stay under budget. with the limited financial resources and revenue that's applicable.
In response to that, yes, I have traveled more. I have traveled more as an individual, as a competitor. But I'm not the one who brought up other regions' national support. That's why I don't know. I haven't been able to see their budgets. I haven't been able to see their books. I haven't seen what they get support on the national level, on the regional level. But you brought it up, and that's why I was just asking for some clarification.
If you're talking about actual specific numbers, again, that's not necessarily something I think any of us would take a look into. If you want to go try to basically ask the question in a different manner, look, the reality is that the way that IPSC runs matches is significantly different than how we run our matches in the United States. So asking the question of why can't we do the same things that IPSC does, we have to acknowledge that there is a significant cultural difference between how we operate the sport, as you've pointed out with the rule book, as the rest of the world runs practical shooting.
Okay, we're just playing in a circle. I mean, I asked you some questions, but we're not getting anywhere. Thank you.
All right. All right. So with that, let's move on to the next part I want to move on to, which is setting the board of director meeting agenda. So in 1992, that was a long time ago, I voted for H. Ross Perot. Okay. Independent presidential candidate, the billionaire before Donald Trump. But my point here is that the Republicans and the Democrats were scared. They got the bejesus scared out of him. So they did everything they could to keep him out of debates and keep him out of office, do everything they could because he had no loyalty to anybody except the American citizens. And that scared the bejesus out of those two large parties. So you guys, one of you is getting voted in to be the president. Do you have any loyalties to any board members or any sponsors that might skew whether you put something on a board of agenda docket or not? And this one will start with Yee-min.
No, appreciate the question and the concern, Dave. So when I was the president, as far as setting the agenda, if any board member requested to add an item to the agenda, it was added without question. So there was no consideration given in terms of who was asking for that particular agenda item to be added. In addition, at the beginning of every board meeting, there was always a lot. Well, after like the first or second month, there was a line item added for agenda approval. So if there was something last minute that came up, that would be added to the agenda, usually at the end if we had the time to be able to cover that. So as far as any loyalties or whatnot, no, I mean, my time as the president was intended really to basically give everybody the opportunity to express themselves and to make sure that their concerns that were heard from an area director perspective.
Okay. Luigi?
So are there any loyalties that I have that would affect any issues with the agenda? Absolutely not. The only loyalty that I have is to the organization and to the members within it. I've worked in the industry. I've worked outside the industry. I've been a sponsor. I've done pretty much everything that USPSA has to offer. As a high-level competitor, as a match director, as a board, like a local sitting on the board years, the board of directors for 8. So there's nothing that would make me withhold any issues on the agenda. Now, the agenda is what the president is charged with. He puts it out, and according to our bylaws, it's 10 days before what the meeting is supposed to happen, right? Now, the reason why those 10 days is written in the bylaws is so the members themselves can reach out and discuss with their area directors, with their president, the issues that will be coming up in the board. So the board members, all 9 of them, can have meaningful dialogue in the meeting and vote in a manner that represents their constituents. If you just have, let's say, let's take, for example, the hot topic, the membership dues that increased, a little while ago. The only thing that was on the agenda was the committee report from the fee committee. That turned into a vote. Now, me as a member, having a fee committee put something in the minutes, that's one thing. Having that vote to increase the fees in that's a whole nother story. So I believe and I feel that the agenda should have a little more information than just one line item of what the topic is. I feel like it should be a small synopsis of what the votes are going to be and what's going to happen. I recall when single stack went from a single frame or single piece frame to a modular single stack 1911. The only thing that was on the agenda for that was discussion of single stack. But in that same vote, we weren't allowed anything other than metal frames. So we couldn't run polymer 1911s, but we could run a modular 1911 with a polymer grip. There was significantly no difference, but the frame itself was in question. And I had conversations with the board of directors, the ones that I had access to. I do have a lot of relationships with the guys that are on there. I had a lot of relationships with the guys that were on there previously. I'm out there, I'm active, I'm communicating. I had the conversation. That was never brought up. That was never an option. It was just, we're going to talk about it. And then it ended up at a vote. Now, I feel disenfranchised as a card-carrying lifetime member that has a decade on my lifetime card. Now.
Did we lose him again, Dave?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. You said we lost you again, Luigi, and you said you had the last thing you said was you had 10 years on your lifetime card, and then whoop.
So, I mean, my lifetime card was, I bought it, 2 months after I joined the sport. And it rolled into a benefactor along the years. But I felt disenfranchised as a card-carrying member because how am I supposed to have a meaningful conversation with my area director if my area director doesn't know what's going to be up for discussion if the agenda is intentionally sparse?
So are you saying you're going to intentionally make it more descriptive so that people know what specifically it is that under that agenda item?
If somebody wants to put an agenda or an item on the agenda, there needs to be a reason as to why. If it's worth putting on the agenda, that reason should be attached to that agenda item. That's my take on it. Because then I, as a member, I can go and discuss it with my area director.
Okay. Yee-min, do you have any comments to what he said?
As far as the agenda items, we're talking about what Luigi's mentioned, there's definitely been instances in the board basically making decisions where, as members, we really didn't have any input to it. He's talking about single stack. As someone who spent my time in production, I was equally caught off guard when they said, hey, production is now 59 ounces, you can add a light, and so on and so forth. And I think the better fundamental question to be asked is, if something is brought up as an agenda item, an agenda item does not necessarily mean that action has to be taken. Agenda item is something that is brought up for the topic of discussion. So you can have that topic discussion, and part of the responsibility of the chair and the president is to basically guide that discussion. So if we start getting involved in something where it's like, okay, we're trying to make the decision and something has to happen now, and I think I just want to reiterate, there's very little that I observed from my time as president that demanded, okay, we put this on the agenda, we have to take a vote now. Agenda item can be brought up, you can have the initial discussion, and then at that point it could be acknowledged that, hey, we don't necessarily have the information that we need to be able to make a discussion, an educated decision. Hey, let's go ahead and task this out to a committee, task this out to someone else, try to get some more research done, before a motion to a vote is actually taking place. So I think, that that's probably something that would be a little bit easier to accomplish in terms of, okay, this item is brought up, let's talk about it. But the understanding is, that's not, unless this is a legal or safety related issue or something that threatens, the very existence of the organization. There's nothing that hurts there's no harm in basically being more deliberative about a particular agenda item than moving, directly to action just because, you feel like something has to be done.
Okay. I'm going to flash something up on the screen because I think this is a good time for it to be discussed. If elected, so you as the president, what life experience do you have that would allow you to bridge the gap, especially, and I think this is especially um, meaningful to the president because you're going to have to deal with the other board members. You're setting the agenda. So you're dealing with all the board members getting what they want, and you're dealing with the paid members, staff members of USPSA and getting that input. And you're that go between person for this. So, what life skills do you bring to the table to help in that arena?
Who do you want to start first with, Dave?
Let's go ahead and go with you started first last. Yee-min, let's go with Luigi.
Okay. So, I mean, like I mentioned before in this conversation, I've owned businesses. I've managed businesses. I've operated businesses. I've been brought into departments as a new manager, a new overseer, a new supervisor, whatever you want to call it, to get SOPs on the ground, to figure out what the situation is, to turn ships around, it in vernacular. So it's not something that is foreign to me to come in and manage different people's personalities and manage different people's ingrained behaviors. Now, specifically with the volunteer officers and the paid employees, the bylaws clearly state that all of the employees are subject to, are under the purview of the managing director. Although the managing director is under the purview of the board of directors. So it's a chain reaction on getting all of the directors' input, handling all of the different personalities that we currently have on the board and the new personalities that will be coming in. The only one that's going to be coming in that isn't currently sitting is we have the Area 6 runoff going on right now. I have a working relationship with both of those individuals already. I would dare say that we're friends. I'm friends with a few members on the board already. Do I agree with everything they do or everything they say or how they act? Not necessarily, but that's not what friends are supposed to do. Do I have working relationships with have I had working relationships with even more of those employees? Yeah, can I hear you now? You guys hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
So I think it was about like when I've had working relationship with the employees. I mean, traveling outside of the country, there are restrictions that you need to abide by. There's hoops that you need to jump through. I've dealt with and communicated with a lot of the not the guys in charge of the office, not the big ones. Everybody knows who we're talking about. I have a relationship with them, but I've also communicated a lot with some of the other staff members that we have in our headquarters, from the director positions all the way down.
Okay. Yee-min.
Hey, Scott. It's good to see you on listening to the show. I really appreciate the question. It has definitely been, I think, for both your experience and my experience being on the board this year. It's been a little bit more contentious than we expected. I think the honest answer at this point is having navigated through really a different paradigm that we had before. So that that was something that we, that I was still in the process of learning to try to figure out, okay, who gets what, who goes to where. That is a discussion that we had in terms of how the organization is structured, who's supposed to be talking to who. Um, that's really the experience that I would say that I would bring is, having experienced it firsthand. We are but basically going through an organizational restructuring, and an organizational restructuring that was, at times contentious. We're trying to figure out, hey, what are the president's roles? Hey, what are the managing director's roles? Who's the point of contact for getting the direction from the board of directors to the managing director? What are the lines of communication like between, the board and the paid staff? So, it was definitely a learning process. It's something I'd like to be able to continue, with some of the lessons I've learned. And it's definitely a very different experience, having, seen it from the outside, and then actually going in and realizing, there wasn't as much defined in terms of processes and procedures, and it's basically building those. So, that it was just a very different experience, and it was a valuable learning experience. And so to be able to build upon that is something that I feel that I would be able to bring to essentially connect the board and the paid staff.
Okay. But so based on your experience with working with them before, you feel that's your greatest advantage. Okay.
Yes, part of it is working with them, and part of it is just understanding, how uncertain and not very well defined the relationships were like. So, there were definitely some missteps on my part, not out of, maliciousness or anything, or it's more the intent of, hey, when you see something that needs to be done, if if it's not getting done, you end up doing it yourself. So, you know, um, I think for both of us being in the Marine Corps, you remember that old term BAMSIS, right? And the most important step of BAMSIS wasn't S, supervise, it was D, do it yourself. And I'm definitely guilty of that, having tasked things out and trying to get everybody on board so that, everybody understands the direction that they're moving, and then realizing, hey, we really need to get something done, and you end up doing something. And, again, I can understand how that would be considered, that what could be considered unacceptable. And it certainly wasn't done from the perspective of, hey, I'm trying to take over your job. It was, hey, we're really understaffed. There's a lot of things that the organization has to take care of. And if there's anything that I could do to try to help push that ball along, I would sort of do first, and beg forgiveness later.
Okay. You can comment since you went first.
Yeah. I There's just a few things in what you just mentioned that I kind of have an issue with. Is you said that we were undergoing an organizational restructuring, and that you didn't know what roles and what procedures had to go through who and all that other stuff. But anybody that has history in the sport knows that it wasn't really a restructuring; it was a destructuring. We were just reverting back to the exact dynamic that we had before Foley came in and removed the executive director. Except instead of an executive director, we have a managing director now. But it understanding what used to happen and the conversations and the way that the minutes and the way that Sherwin, the interim president, described everything was going back to what we had before Foley consolidated the position. Is that something that you relearn? How is that something that going into the position? I mean, the bylaws specifically stated what the roles and responsibilities, what the president did, and the bylaws haven't changed since you got in. What's the difference now? Why do we still have to learn what the position is, but instead of just doing what the position entails? That was just my biggest issue with all of it.
If I may interject real quick, I will say that Scott and I had a conversation And he said privately we had this conversation, and he's echoed a few of the same things that Yee-min said here as well. So, but go ahead, Yee-min. I just
No,
wanted to throw it out there that there were, Scott coming in new had some of the same problems. So that's all.
So I appreciate you bringing up the question, Luigi. Yes, did we essentially move back to the position that it was held under Phil Strader? Sure, we can say we did that. And at the same time, let's see, Foley was elected in 2014. The organizational structure was changed at that point to a president and CEO. So we basically went back to the future, and I'm sure, if you were to be elected, that you would find out, hey, there really wasn't any sort of historical, there was no historical knowledge left over. So it's not like we just suddenly flipped a switch and said, hey, let's go back in time to 2014 and actually find all the documents that were in place to actually say, hey, how do we actually run things as a president, managing director / executive director position as opposed to being president and CEO. Again, one of the challenges that happened, is that you go in. Yes, the bylaws are out there. The bylaws also give you guidance. If you're someone that's experienced in business, you'll also understand that in order to run a business, there should be defined policies and procedures in place to help guide you in what you're supposed to do. If all you have are the bylaws are just a general description. It's a guide. It doesn't tell you, hey, if Luigi wants to apply to go to the Handgun World Shoot in 2025 in South Africa, this is how we're going to run that process. So I think it's a little bit of a false narrative here to say, hey, we just went back in the future. Why don't we just open up the book and say, hey, this is how we were supposed to do something? It was a learning experience. And again, even, with talking with, the board members and the staff members, there was a lot of uncertainty about, hey, what is the corporate and political and, corporate culture going to look like now that we're going back to a president and a managing director role? So, I think it's a little disingenuous to say, well, let's just go back to the past. We already know how to do this. Okay, great. If the book was there to tell us how to do that, and the bylaws are not a sufficient, point of departure, it's a guide, then sure, that's something that we would have followed.
Yeah, correct. The bylaws are a guide. The bylaws are these things that say this is what you're in charge of, right? It doesn't tell you how to do it. Now, in the corporate world, yes. Business acumen, yes. I've been thrown into managerial positions before. The situation has recently changed, and there are SOPs, and there are no processes or procedures that are codified. And that was one of the responsibilities of an incoming manager, of an incoming supervisor, of an incoming owner. You need to enact these processes and procedures so the subsequent people that take your position know exactly what it is, so you're not handing off, a bag of snakes. I've been in that position. I've done that. When you were president for 8 months, you knew that going in. What policies did you codify for your subsequent people? I mean, what policies did you codify for Ted coming in as your interim president?
If you're going to ask me about what policies that took in place to transfer, given the fact that we were trying to figure out that relationship to begin with, again, not exactly, there were a number of priorities. So I appreciate the direction of the question that you're asking. Okay, yeah, it was trying to figure out a lot of it was just trying to figure out the nature of the relationship and how things were going to work moving forward. I'm sure that you, as coming as a manager, if you were appropriately empowered to make those decisions, then yes, you have the full support. The relationship at USPSA right now, again, it's more of a collaborative and collegial relationship, and not necessarily where you get to walk in and say, hey, you're supposed to fix everything, and you're completely empowered to do so.
And that rolls back to how the relationships that we have with the current working members of the board and the employees are.
Okay.
Is it not? We have to work with the other guys, because you do not have the power to come in and say, yes, this is what we are doing. You have to come in as a leader and say, this is what we should be doing. This is the direction that we need to be going. How do we work together to do it? And if
Yeah,
you're kind of,
everything sounds great in principle. So obviously things are, first thing you learn is that the best laid plans of mice and men, it doesn't really quite work the way it is when you're actually on the ground. So, I mean, if you're alluding to some sort of, something you've heard through the grapevine, like, why don't you just go on ahead and spit it out?
I haven't heard anything through the grapevine.
Well, your question seemed to insinuate that. So, what are you really trying to get at here?
The only thing that I asked was, what policies did you actually enact for your successors? That was all I asked.
But that's not the direction where this question is going here right now. So
it's your response, buddy.
Let's just be upfront. No, let's just be upfront. What are you trying to get at here then?
Is there anything that you have put in with policies and procedures? The guy that's coming in after you, or the guy that came in after you, wasn't sitting there trying to figure out what relationships were and how to handle what he needed to come into. That was simply what I asked.
Right. Look, given the nature of things that were happening, there was a lot. I was trying, even for myself, I was trying to figure out basically the nature of the relationship, given that we were going back to a president managing director role. Nothing was handed to me, so starting from nothing in 8 months, I had to prioritize.
Sounds good. All right, Dave, what else you got for us?
All right, real quick, I'm going to say that I've been in those positions where you've got to set stuff up for other people coming in. I think it's different when you have an expected departure date and that changes with a suddenty and without any forewarning. So, and that's not to make excuses for anyone, but I've been in that position. So I'm just putting that out there because Luigi, I was trying to figure out where you were going with the questioning. That's all.
I was
unsure.
It was simply a question of what was actually put in place. No timeline, no anything. I mean, Yee-min, you were president for 8 months. Your whole term was how long that you had left?
Approximately 16 months.
16 months. So your term was cut in half. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. We'll move on. All right. Now, I'm going to we're going to go to setting the committees now. Because as I understand it, that's one of the responsibilities of the president.
Correct.
Now, for you guys, what are your thoughts on how you assemble those committees? And I believe, Luigi, I believe you got the second. I think you got Scott's question.
Yeah.
So Yee-min, we'll start with you, which means you'll be able to have a rebuttal time after Luigi.
Okay, no, I appreciate it, Dave. So as far as the committees, the idea of committees was to essentially staff out the work so that the board members could be, provided with the appropriate information to make educated decisions on the topics facing the organization. And as far as staffing those, that was an organizational cultural change that we were trying to work towards when I first took over. So traditionally, our committees have been staffed by all board members, as well as some of the employees of the organization, and there is this recognition that as part-time volunteers, the board members really, that's maybe not the best use of their time. We were in the process of trying to bring on more skilled personnel with the appropriate professional resources to be able to assist us in making our decisions. So Scott, I know that was something that we were working on with the finance committee to try to bring on, folks with the appropriate financial and accounting knowledge. So that's, again, that's something I'd really like for us to be able to look at. Again, the bylaws are the bylaws do kind of lay out some stipulations on what we can staff the committees with on certain ones, but I would personally love to be able to pull on our volunteer base. I mean, we've got a lot of folks out there that have, various professional and personal skills, and, just giving them a stake in how we do business, that gives them the opportunity to, have their input. So, that I would love for us to be able to kind of formalize that. That was something I started on in the committee policy that was generated in January of this year. But again, it's something I'd like to be able to refine that says, hey, we really would like to have our members and volunteers, actively engaged in guiding the discussion and the decisions that the organization makes.
Okay, Luigi.
I'm going to say yes to everything that Yee-min just said. All valid points. I'm going to give props to Yee-min for actually bringing on outsiders other than just board members onto certain committees. Yes, the bylaws do stipulate some restrictions for things like the finance or committees and just who has access to all of the information. That's another valid thing. But yeah, the committees do need to have experts in their field, and this is something that one of the Area 6 director candidates has been working with the board, has been working with Yee-min previously. It's getting experts that we've got almost 40,000 members. I'm sure that whatever issues that we have, whatever committees we decide to field, we're going to have somebody who knows more than what we do. And we should be asking them for their insight.
Now, I just want to, I'm going to clarify something for the audience. You're not saying that the board members are stupid. You're saying
No.
they have expertise in certain areas because not everybody knows everything.
We don't. There's no way. I mean,
right. Exactly.
even if you're a one-man shop, like let's say you're the best craftsman at whatever it is you do, there's always so why not ask that knowledge pool? Not saying that I don't know it. I mean, I don't know everything. I will be the first person to say I don't know. But I don't have the ego to say, hey, I need help. So let's just ask somebody that has a larger experience base to throw some information out there. And I've been on a few different committees before. I've been on a few different committees in a few different industries. That is the legwork that you have to do. That they're the ones who are going to who offer you the options of what solutions are. And if we're just going to have the same echo chamber, which is the same 9 people on every single committee, plus some employees, then it just doesn't work. It's the same thing as just having a closed board meeting, executive sessions, and make all our decisions that way, which is not conducive to operating a business.
Okay. Yee-min, you have any comments?
No, hey, we both agree. I mean, what I would really like for us to see is to be able to actually formalize that. I know I was guilty of that as, some of the other folks. Sometimes when you run into a situation, you tend to ask, those people that are experts in a particular field. So, that can definitely lead to some feeling of being left out of the decision-making process. So to formalize that where, we have known people that are on the committees that say, hey, this is why this person's on this committee. That way everybody's sort of getting the same advice and the same input so that, decisions can be made. So, I would totally agree with Luigi. Let's utilize our volunteers and the expertise that they can bring, to move the ship forward.
Okay.
We're in agreement.
Yay!
Yeah. All right. Now I came up with a side question on this because of something Luigi said. You said you understand that there are some things like finances that you don't let everybody see. But my question is, what makes what makes a board member any more special than me? I'm a paying member. This is not the White House. They're not going through a background check. So why do they, just because they got voted, all of a sudden they get access to something that I'm not allowed to see?
Well, I would say initially it's not just that they got voted in. Yes, it is a position, but there's also the responsibility that goes with it, right? So yes, as the president or anybody that's elected to the board of directors, why do they get to see something different than what the membership sees? Again, that's probably a question for corporate governance lawyers. But the flip side is also, you're not, neither of us right now are in a position where we basically make decisions that could impact the fiduciary health of the organization, right? So, it's not like somebody's going to get in trouble years. Any of us are getting in trouble years later if we look at something and go, well, why did the numbers look wrong? There is a responsibility that comes with the elected position, and not just, hey, you get to see the unfiltered message.
But that's why you're making the decision.
Correct.
Me as an unelected individual, me seeing it, I'm not going to be divulging something to anybody that's going to put the organization at risk. And I'm not going to be making that decision. But I guess
Right.
what I'm getting at is things like, oh, they don't want to see what the budget is for a nationals or what the numbers were at the end of the nationals. I don't, that shouldn't be restricted if we're having a committee. And this is me speaking, so I am asking for you guys' input on this. But as members, and this being a nonprofit organization, so we're not a for-profit, we don't have anything that we're trying to hide from any other corporation that, we're worried about corporate theft. Why would you be restricting those numbers from, a finance committee, we're only going to have a couple of people on it because we want to restrict those numbers? That doesn't make sense to me. So can you guys make that make sense?
You first, Luigi.
The easiest way that I was explaining this is, one is an officer of the corporation, because all the board of directors, they're officers in the corporation, and you as a member, you are a shareholder of the corporation. You get the legally published information, the Form 990, the budget that's put on the website. The officers may have access to what the line item expenses are, pluses and minuses, what the accounting software. That was how it was explained to me. But again, I haven't been in that position. I'm not in that position currently. I can't give you a better answer than that.
Okay. Yeah, I just don't see why we couldn't share the spreadsheets. I'm not talking about all the nuts and bolts behind that, but we can move on too. So, okay. Now, another big hot topic is, I'm going to go back to the first debate that we had, and Todd Jarrett wanted a code of conduct. I know that there was an incident at Talladega. So that's what spurred his thought on that. I don't know what happened at Area 3, but something happened there. Give me your individual thoughts on a code of conduct for membership as well as the board of directors. And we should be back to Luigi.
I thought I took the previous one.
Okay.
The last one was committees, right?
Yeah. Last one was committees. We have an employee handbook, or we should have an employee handbook. Every business should have one.
Agree.
If we don't, then that's an issue that's gonna have to get dealt with once I get in there. So as an employee, you're held to a certain standard because you're signing a contract. As an officer of the corporation, i.e. the area directors, you should be held to a higher standard. But as I've said before, we have a code of conduct. It's written in our rule book. And why do we need something codified if it's already done?
Okay. Yee-min.
For those of you who may not have listened to Dave Blanton's podcast, I am so sorry that I even said code of conduct, because that's not, yeah. I think it was a very important lesson about how words mean things, David. So, if we're talking about, look, the USPSA rules basically do have a process for unsportsmanlike conduct. The discussion at the time and the thought process was that at the time was that there's something that's spelled out, not only somewhat spelled out for competitors attending the matches. We do have something that is somewhat spelled out for range officials working matches. And then there's something similar that's spelled out for employees and members of the leadership in the organization. At the end of the day, I think that's really a discussion that we could potentially start on to basically clarify that. Again, we do talk about unsportsmanlike conduct, and the question at the time is, well, what is considered unsportsmanlike conduct? There's only a handful of things that are actually spelled out as saying, hey, this is specifically unsportsmanlike conduct. I think we figured that out at Area 3, but it's honestly, it's very much dependent on the range official, right? And so you may have range officials that have different levels of tolerances for behavior than others. So, it puts the onus on our volunteer staff. And there is some uncertainty about, hey, what are the guardrails? What are the things that are considered acceptable behavior at a range? So, I've certainly, I've been on the receiving end of that as well. So, do I think that that's something needs to be implemented right here and now? No. Is it a discussion that we can have that says, hey, is this considered, appropriate? Is this considered appropriate? Taking a look at some other examples, that's something worth looking at. And at the same time, is it the most pressing issue or something that needs to be considered right now? We'll add that to the list of, I think, the concerns that both Luigi and I share with how the organization and functions and the direction that it needs to go.
Okay. Luigi, you have any comments or?
I'm good with the situation.
Okay. Moving right along. We've talked about finances, and we've talked about agendas, and thanks, Tanfo. You threw me off, Timmy, when you posted that comment.
Yes, you do, Tim.
We were going to talk about meeting minutes. We've talked about agenda items, things of that nature. And with the finances, give me your thoughts on in-person virtual meetings where maybe the organization saves some money, where they can hold an in-person virtual meeting versus a regular in-person meeting, and also lives. Again, I'm going to bring this topic up again, and that is live streaming board meetings. So Yee-min, we're back to you.
Yeah, I've got this question. So as far as the in-person board meeting, I think that's something that we're obligated to do under the bylaws. It is definitely considered, somewhat of a noticeable expense for the organization. And there are certain things that we do at an in-person board meeting that we don't necessarily do at our regularly scheduled board meetings. Is there some value in making it virtual? There definitely would be some cost savings associated with that. And at the same time, having run a number of board meetings before my departure, I don't know about you, Dave, but being on a Zoom meeting for 2 days straight, that's you're going to need a lot of Monster and a lot of dip to kind of make it through that meeting, right? So, when we're talking about committees, if you look at what we did this year, we had the committees, we had, the decision about production 15, limited optics L10, and then there's various other, annual related issues that we deal with. That is, it's a little bit of a challenge. I think we really have to take a hard look and go, okay, if we're basically going to try to save money by not having this in-person board meeting, what, does that mean that our virtual in-person board meeting now is, longer? Because, again, I think we started at 8:00 in the morning. First day we didn't leave until 7. The second day we finished at 5. That's a long time to have your butt in the seat watching a screen. I think something that I would have liked for us to be able to move to is if we were to meet in person, have that be more of a corporate, have that more of a corporate strategy planning session, right? I mean, because that was something that I observed in my time in, is that, hey, the in-person board meeting was something where we tried to basically set what the annual goals were for the year, but it was mixed in with, a lot of the sundry business that had to be dealt with, right? And so finding that time and space for the board to be able to think about strategic planning, that was something I really would have liked for us to have been able to find the time for that. So, thinking about it, the in-person board meeting is more of an off-site strategic planning session. That was something I thought, would be a more valuable use for time. So that way, again, for Luigi, I totally get it, right? If you want to have some sort of continuity, right? So every 2 years, we basically change a board member. If that new board member comes in, at least they can say that we can point them a document that says, hey, this was what our strategic planning was for 2023. So, like, for example, Russell or Ben Berry or Kyle Stevens coming in, they're not basically going, hey, what are we trying to do here? There's at least some guiding document that we can provide. So anyway, moving on from that and talking about the live streaming, I think that'd be really a really good option. Something that we could potentially look at. I think our biggest the challenge is, basically looking at, whatever the technical requirements are, right? So, I know basically we ran our board meetings through Zoom. Whatever our ability to handle that is, if we were to basically live stream that, and make it available to the members, I just don't know what I don't know right now to be able to say, okay, what happens if we get, 20, 15, 20,000 people logged in to basically watch the live stream? Is that something that the organization's IT infrastructure is able to support or not? But it's certainly, certainly something I'd be willing to basically take a serious look at and say, hey, how can we be a little bit more open and, let the membership see just how amazingly awesome board meetings are. They're great. Super exciting.
Luigi, that's sarcasm. I get it.
I'm serious. I'm absolutely serious. They're the greatest thing.
All right, Luigi, go ahead.
Just to parrot what Yee-min said, I've sat on a few different boards, and board meetings are that. But in answer to what the question is specifically, the in-person board meeting is governed by our bylaws. We have guidelines, if you want to call them that, but there are bylaws. There are certain requirements that our in-person board meetings have. We're required to have one every year. We're also required to have a general membership meeting at every national event. So the bylaws require certain things. Unfortunately, the bylaws don't specify anything for the in-between meetings that we consider board meetings, what our normal minutes are coming out at. But if you look at our bylaws also state that any meeting that is done through phone or done through Zoom or done through any form of communication is considered an in-person board meeting. So our bylaws are very specific and restrict what we can and can't do. Saying that monthly on Tuesdays is not an in-person board meeting, but the bylaws consider it. So some people will say we cannot record it, we cannot live stream it. If you want to watch it, you have to go through the same policy as if it were the in-person board meeting that has historically been held in January. So it's not an issue of what I want to change. It's an issue of what we can do. And right now we're very limited, or we should have some clarification on if the monthly meetings that we have that is electronic, if that is considered officially an in-person board meeting or not, if we want to live stream it. So like Yee-min has stated before, it's a learning experience. There's a lot of stuff that we have to do. We have to learn and discuss and figure out who's in charge of what. But we need to clarify the things between what meetings are considered what, like a special board meeting or an in-person board meeting or just a virtual in-person board meeting, what the restrictions are per the bylaws, and if need be, change the bylaws to open it up to everyone. I mean, yes, we are restricted. We are restricted technologically on what we can do. But I've been on Zoom calls with 10,000 employees. I've been on monthly town hall meetings in a corporate venture with 20,000 employees all logged in at the same time. The systems are out there. The technology's out there. There's nothing to say that it's not doable. Unfortunately, we're restricted by the bylaws that we have to play by. It's like I say to anybody that goes to shoot any of the other sports. You have a set of rules. You have to play by the rules. And unfortunately, some people have said that we can play fast and loose with them. And Patrick just says there's 27 people logged in right now.
He lied. There's 28. He's trying to short me.
You got to bump those numbers up. You got to bump those numbers up for the followers so you can get that silver plaque, Dave.
Those are big numbers, Dave. You got to bump them up.
Okay, the bottom line is, would you support a change to where it would include members being able to view board meetings?
Yes, I would support something like that. But in the meantime, what the president can do is the president is in charge of the agenda, as well as appointing a secretary to keep the minutes. Been pretty active following the school board, just because of the nature of my situation and the nature of my situation that has been. A lot of those minutes have verbatim statements, and in any of the votes, who's for, who's against, and they have reasons why. It's a lot more in depth than what we've historically seen in USPSA. And that is something that the president does have say in. And I would like, and Scott says 10.2 gets changed. There's no live streaming. So yeah, you beat me to it. But yeah, it's something that the minutes can be more than what they are, and have a lot more transparency. And it's a step in the right direction to get to where Scott's saying, changing bylaws to get things more open.
Well, and initially for the audience, because you guys saw it on there, I made a change, but initially I was going to bring up meeting minutes because of that exact thing you were talking about. And there is software out there, free software called Descript. That's just one option that allows you to put a recording in, and it will give you a transcript of it, and then you can go back and edit out with anything that may be sensitive, but it takes all that time of that recording and putting it into a manuscript per se for you. So there are things out there that wouldn't be time consuming, and you could still get a lot more meeting minutes out of it. So Yee-min, would you support changing 10.2 and opening it up to members?
Well, as Scott well knows, when we first waived 10.2 at the February board meeting so that we could communicate to the membership about limited optics, there may or may not have been a little bit of heat sent my way because I wanted to basically send a high-level message to the members that said, hey, we made limited optics a provisional division. I think one of the things, 10.2, there's some historical reasons for that. But within the confines, confines that we were operating in, the meeting minutes were, again, per Robert's rules, the meeting minutes is a record of actions taken. And so Scott can attest to this. I went on the show with him and Joel Park. There's ways that we can basically communicate the context and the details to the membership where you can, explain the why. If we were to have the meeting minutes be a transcript, well, then it's technically not meeting minutes more. It's a straight up transcript. So, I guess, it's a long-winded way to basically say, the meeting minutes are really a summary. Hey, we voted to do this. somebody made a motion to do this. The explanation, hey, why did we do this? What was being discussed, so on and so forth. That's something that, at least with my time in as president, that was something I really, tried to push for, to be able to engage the membership, much more than what I saw. Again, can someone say, it wasn't necessarily done through the right medium and the right method? Sure, the execution could have been done differently, but the intent was to engage the membership. Hey, this is what we've got going on. This is why we're doing this. And I think that it's basically finding a way to communicate with the membership outside of what Robert's rule says we can and can't do within the meeting minutes.
Okay. All right. All right, I'm going to give you guys the option. There's one last, the DNROI. We could either do that or we can go to closing statements. It's up to you guys.
You're the moderator.
You're the chair, sir.
Well, sauna. All right. Well, we're going to do it then. All right. So I'm using DNROI as just a blanket term. It's not a person. It's a position. So this is not to point to anybody in particular, but we know there were some unintended consequences of the last bylaw change. Okay. Now, there's been talk of that needs to be corrected, but I want to go one bit further. So that's part A. Part B. So I want your thought on that. Part B is also, give me your thoughts on removing somebody prior to if there's an appeals, prior to that being complete. And I think this is Yee-min.
I'll take it first because, I have absolutely no context or understanding of this question at all. It has nothing to do with my previous history. But I do want to ask a clarification on the second question.
Okay.
So your part B, I sort of heard that, and I'm not entirely sure. Are you talking about the removal of somebody prior to an appeals being complete?
Yes. So A was just clarify. Do we need to clarify that other part where, okay. So let me just rephrase the whole thing here. Part A is you have DNROI who basically reports to the board, directly to the board. And then, so you have a conflict here. You have board members that could remove DNROI and DNROI who can remove board members by basically suspending their RO. Now, should that be clarified to where if DNROI is going to be deciding a board member's status, should that be changed to he has to bring it to the board? That person is absent from the meeting. They discuss it, they vote on it, and it goes that way. Or should DNR, I don't know why that's so hard for me. DNROI.
It's 23:20, sir. It's late. It's past our bedtime.
So DNROI, should they maintain that power? And part two is, okay, let's say they do. DNROI says, okay, your RO is hereby suspended. Bylaws say you are immediately no longer a board member. So you are removed from the board. And then you have to go to the appeals process to get it back in, or should they maintain their status until that whole process is exhausted? And they just stay out of anything that would be DNROI related. So those are the two parts.
Well, since we kind of addressed it at the beginning, and this is, this is something that I have some personal experience with. You're right, Dave. So this year has been very much the year of unintended consequences. The requirement to have an elected official be RO certified. That decision was made by the previous board for reasons that made sense, ensuring that the elected leadership had a skin in the game. And the discipline process that was presented by the director of NRI to the board, that was also put in place to have something more formal than what was previously in place. Definitely where what was missing was sort of taking a look at the two and going, well, what happens if this particular situation exists? And well, we basically did have to run into that situation. I I think there is something to be said about taking a look at those consequences. I don't necessarily know what the answer is, but clearly we've definitely been put in a situation this year that I don't think anybody anticipated. Regardless of what the details are. So I know that's something that's been on the board's agenda, since their decision was made about my appeal. And for one reason or another, things have sort of put that on the back burner. But I think there is something to be said about that, taking a look at that. And again, not necessarily something that needs an immediate decision, but there should at least be, a deliberate discussion about, okay, what happens in this particular instance, especially for, someone like me where, and Luigi, I know you've done it too. We've kind of made, part of a lot of the great relationships we've made is because we've given back to the sport and we say, hey, you need help, I'll come help you. And so that definitely has a little bit of a chilling effect if you realize that you can be put in a position where things can be interpreted in a particular way, and now your elected position is at risk. Now, as far as with regards to whether someone should stay in position, pending an appeal, again, I can only go off of my experience. That the board, was handed a very contentious situation, and so in my particular instance, I did remain within the employ of the organization until the appeal was complete. So, was I necessarily the president? No, that decision was made that I wasn't the president anymore. But it was stated that hey, if the depending on the results of the appeal, that would determine whether I would retake the position. So, I think all things considered, given the unusual nature and the territory that the board wasn't really expecting to go into, I think at least as far as your second question is concerned, they handle it in the best and most professional way possible. Hey, we're going to kind of put you on hold right now, but we won't make a final determination on your status as president until the appeal is done, and I thought that was appropriate.
Okay, Luigi.
The only thing that I'm going to say here is once you take that position, once you take officer position, employee position, president, whatever you want to call it, you should be held to somewhat of a higher standard. Why even put yourself in that position to where this is even a discussion? Don't put yourself in that position. We never even have to think about it. But like Yee-min said, this has been on the agenda. It's also, again, on the agenda for this coming Tuesday, the 28th. We have 4 months until the new president comes in. It'll probably be decided on by then. Why would we even go there? Why would we even put ourselves in that position? Unfortunately.
By that, you mean actions?
We lost him again.
You disappeared.
Disappeared again?
Oh, yeah, man. And then came back.
That was really good timing.
Just mic drop, right? No, don't put yourself in that situation, and we don't have anything to worry about.
Okay, I get what you're saying, but at the same time, I mean, there are people. Look, as nice as some people are, there are still people that don't like the nicest people.
Absolutely.
Like I have literally said, there's a guy I know that I work with, and another guy and this guy is liked by everybody. It's hard not to like this guy. I mean, you have to work hard not to like this guy. And this other guy came into work late one day. He had some time off, so he came in later, and he was all in an angry mood. I'm like, man, what's up? And he goes, I don't like that other guy. I can't stand him. I was like taken aback, and I'm like, what? So my whole point here is there are no matter how nice people are, and no matter their actions, there are people that don't like them. When people don't like you, like he did not like him, and he treated him poorly, and he was a supervisor. If they have an axe to grind, they can still go after you. Especially, like, let's say you made a decision. Let's say Luigi becomes president. Luigi votes, and this guy doesn't like it. He makes a complaint to DNROI, and now you're under investigation. My whole point here is, when it's a board member, should DNROI then have to go to the board as a whole for a vote instead of putting the power in one person's hands who now can change the organization? That's all I'm getting at.
Why would we be giving a board member or the president any different member? It should be the same, right? So if we're going to suspend somebody's RO credentials, should it not go to a committee of the board, which is the final appeal? So this decision will probably be made before Yee-min or I go back in the office. But yes, it should be gone to the full appeals process finished before what full action gets taken.
Okay. All right.
This is only more important for, a board member because they're sitting. But let's say this happens a week before nationals and you're set up to be an RO or a CRO or what have you. Take into consideration Yee-min. Yee-min was set up to work Dragon's Cup this year. And the range master decided that only current ROs were eligible to hold the timer. And the tablet, or just a timer? I don't recall.
It was the timer.
No, so just a timer.
Yes.
His appeal hasn't been finalized. So even if he weren't president at the time, there should be no reason why him as an individual member be barred from exercising his abilities and his certifications up until his full appeal process is finished.
Luigi's right, and to be fair, that's a question with regards to how the discipline policy was spelled out. So there isn't really anything that says, hey, if you're appealing your decision and it's got to go before the board, what happens to your status?
Right. What happens to that status?
I think a big issue here is there were a lot of changes that were made, and we didn't stop to ask if we should, instead of just seeing that we could. And that's it.
Okay. I'm going to post these. Kyle put one up saying Kyle Stevens put one up saying 7.8 should not circumnavigate 7.7. Ben Berry put one up saying 7.7 ought to be the sole method through which a board member is removed. Appeal or no appeal, at most removal of RO cert should at most prompt a vote but not replace one. Okay, I'm not quite sure what he was trying to say there, but him and Kyle are both saying 7.7.
Yeah, I think what gentlemen, you can just comment. I'm not seeing the comments right now, but just to clarify, so when my RO certification was removed, according to 7.8, the interpretation at the time was that I was considered resigned because I no longer held the qualifications necessary to be in elected office. So if I understand Ben and Kyle correctly, what you all are saying is that that 7.8 should be more clearly written so that if this situation were to happen again, then rather than it being an automatic, hey, you're out, it is still a decision of the board to basically determine whether an elected official should still be present.
Okay.
And again, I think there's definitely some precedents that have been set with different RO certification statuses and whatnot. And so I think at the end of the day, I think what the membership is asking and what they're trying to find out is, hey, we just want some clarity. Are the rules, or are the rules sometimes the rules?
Well, and I'm gonna put Matt Nash's comment up here now, because this is where I was trying to get at, is that no rule should provide power to any one person to remove an elected official. And that's my point with the DNROI being able to suspend an RO certification, thereby removing an elected official. So let's see what Kyle has here. Remove a director or officer who no longer meets the requirements shall be considered to have resigned. Yeah, which we were just talking about. So
quit bringing up bylaw discussions, Kyle. It's like it's 11:30. We want to go to bed. We can talk about this stuff later.
We can do this tomorrow. All right. So we beat that one down. The last one I have is closing statements. So why are you running, and why should someone, what are you bringing to the board that would make someone vote for you? And I don't remember who got the last one now. So whoever would like to go first.
It's late. I'll start off first, Dave.
Okay, go ahead, because it's early where you're at.
It's dark here, sir, too. We could be drinking right now, but I'm at the range because I like spending time with you guys. Hey, look, so for everybody that's listening, I really appreciate the time and patience that you had. This was a very long debate. You elected me last year. I've spent the time working. There was some really good progress that we were making in terms of turning the organization around, trying to implement some measures that took place. I gave everything I had to the organization. Jody, you personally I sacrificed a lot of my own personal self-care and with Jody as well, because I wanted to basically help the sport. Unfortunately, that opportunity was cut short. And I really just want the opportunity to finish what we started, making progress towards closer relationships with IPSC and USPSA. A lot of things we've talked about in terms of, information flow from the organization to the membership. Those good ideas are out there, and the organization does care. I appreciate everybody who voted for me, and if you put me back in there, then I really want the opportunity to basically finish what we started, finish what you elected me to do. So appreciate it, everybody, and thanks for being here.
All right, thank you, Yee-min. Luigi. All right, before we can live stream Luigi, we got to fix his stuff.
Just tell it to stop. Just tell it to stop raining in Florida.
It cut out. It cut out as soon as it happened. Of course. But I mean, I just traveled to Area 1. I didn't even shoot the match, just because I wanted to go out west, since I haven't had a chance to go out west previously for an area match, and just discuss with a lot of the members that were there. A lot of the feedback that I was having is we just need some leadership. We need consistency. We need professionalism, and that was the biggest overarching theme that I've had in all the communication that I've had with people, online, in person, phone calls, emails, what have you. I mean, I've been very, very open to people reaching out to me and having my information out there for people to contact me. And realistically, I have the abilities, I have the qualifications, I have what we need to put 4 years in as president. And I have a great relationship with the managing director. I have a pretty good relationship with employees that are in the organization. I'm just really excited to work with everyone, take everyone's opinions, take everyone's information, and put it to good use and give us some guidance.
Okay. And just so you know, I did a little joke thing while you were talking. You said everyone has your contact number, so I ran 867-5309.
Yeah, I saw that and reacted. And I'm like, God damn it. I was trying to be serious for Luigi.
All right. Gentlemen, I appreciate it. Thank you, audience, for watching and listening. So for you guys, I'm going to download this, and probably in the morning, since it's 11:25 Eastern Standard Time, I'll download it, quickly put it in an audio format, and upload it so everybody can have it for about 7 days before elections.
Elections are going to be on for 30 days, so we've got quite a while.
I'm hoping we can shut down the internet like we did for Carry Optics Nationals, though, on day one of voting.
Yeah, that's a different server, sir.
It's a third-party election company. I think they have the bandwidth to do it.
Yeah, we'll see. Challenge accepted. All right, gentlemen, I appreciate it. You guys have a great evening.
Thank you very much for having us on.
Dave, thanks for taking the time out of your schedule for us as always.
My pleasure.